Over centuries, the United States of America has become home to hundreds of diverse religions. However, not all of these religions align themselves with United States ideals. Religions are not afraid to disobey the law in order to continue their practices. This is shown by the College Board provided stimulus, Moral Courage and Intelligent Disobedience by Ted Thomas. In the stimulus, Ted outlines how a critical application of moral courage is knowing when and how to disobey, which can be thought of as intelligent disobedience. Intelligent disobedience is proof that religions do not have courage to go, or do have courage to go against laws to pursue what they believe is right. So, how should a nation that holds religious freedom as a high virtue navigate the dangers that come with it? Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan McKenna, and this is religious schooling in the United States. First, I want to provide some context to this problem. These graphs come from the National Center of Education Statistics and show demographics for both school institutions and students. As you can see, while most are public, over 25% of schools are private, with 2/3 of those being religious. And for students, 10% of them are in some form of private education. The truth is, private education is completely unregulated in the United States, and schools have free reign over their curriculums. Students could be receiving improper education, could be being taught falsehoods about other religions, or even worse, could be learning religious practices that invoke violence towards others, and no one would know. It is not unreasonable to assume these things are actually happening, because as reflected back on the College Board stimulus, religions will prioritize doing what they think is right, in this case, teaching their practices over following the law. This leads to the question, to what extent should religious schools' curriculums be limited in the 21st century United States? Through my research, I've identified 3 aspects of this question that are important to analyze: religious liberty, public funding, and education standards. The first and most important aspect is religious liberty. Religious liberty is the freedom of a person to express their own religious values and is a founding principle of the United States. This idea of religious liberty became an official law with the First Amendment, written by founding father James Madison, who is pictured here. The beginning of the amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Clearly, this amendment bans Congress from passing any laws that prohibit religious liberty. Does that mean that religions can go on to practice whatever traditions they want, even if it puts others in danger? The answer is no. In a clarification on federal protections for religious liberty, the Attorney General states that, except in the narrow circumstances, no one should be forced to choose between his or her faith and complying with the law. Therefore, to the greatest extent possible, practicable and permitted by law, religious observance and practice should be reasonably accommodated in all government activity. This means that there are circumstances where religious liberty cannot be fully satisfied and must be limited. More specifically, religious liberty must be limited when a religion's practices break the law. One example of this lies in Sikhism. As part of the religion, most Sikhs carry a small blade called a kirpan on their person at all times. However, that is not possible when traveling in the United States. A document from the TSA detailing information for Sikh travelers states that the kirpan is considered a sharp object and must be in checked baggage and cannot be worn or carried through checkpoints. Sikhs are not allowed to carry their kirpans on flights due to the possibility of harming others. In this same sense, religious schools' curriculums should be limited if found to be teaching violent practices to students. Another aspect of this problem is funding. Religious schools receive no government funding, which forces them to have high tuition costs. Public schools, on the other hand, are free due to government funding. All parents have a preference on what environment they want their children to learn in. Some may want their children to learn in a religious setting, but can't afford the high costs that are associated with it. This goes against the principle of religious freedom that the United States was built on. Parents should be able to freely decide whether their children get a religious or public education without financial stress taking a considerable factor. This is why religious schools should be included in public funding. In addition to providing religious freedoms to parents, public funding would also allow religious schools to better their education. A study conducted by Michael Mary found that most Islamic schools in the United States struggle with staffing and resources, lacking school nurses, guidance counselors, social workers, libraries, extracurriculars, and even fine art classes. With the resources provided by public funding, education standards should be introduced to religious schools. As mentioned before, religious schools currently have free reign over their curriculums, meaning students could be receiving an improper education. Education standards would ensure that students are receiving a quality education. These standards should be the same as those already implemented in public schools. This way, a student switching from a religious school to a public school, or vice versa, won't be missing any key concepts. To conclude, my resolution to this problem is that the U.S. must continue to protect religious freedoms by including religious schools in public funding, and by not limiting their curriculums as long as they meet basic education standards and do not promote or teach violent practices. Some implications of my resolution would be to have religious schools submit their curriculums to be reviewed to ensure no laws are being broken. Students would also participate in whatever statewide tests public schools are taking to ensure that education standards are being met. A limitation of my resolution is that it may be difficult to effectively monitor religious schools and will likely require in-person visits. Another limitation is that including religious schools in public funding would cause public schools to receive less funding, as they would be sharing the same funds. Despite these limitations, I believe my resolution is necessary to not only give students the best education, but also protect the religious freedoms that made the United States what it is today. Thank you.
All right, 2 questions. Tell me how your research question evolved as you worked your way through this process.
Sure. Well, I knew I wanted to do something with religion, so I started going through different databases and libraries such as EBSCO to look at sources that involved with religion. I noticed a lot had to do with the issue of religious liberty, and so I wanted to incorporate that with education somehow. So I came to my question.
Okay. And what advice would you have for other people that want to do this in the future?
Definitely find government sources, because there are already a lot of documents detailing the implications of religious liberty in the United States and how it should be handled.